Good afternoon and welcome to the Nonprofit Exchange, Leadership Tools and Strategies. So thrilled to have you in here in early June as we chat with Al Winseman from the Gallup organization. Really excited to share with you some great news. Later on this week, we will be launching the June issue of Nonprofit Performance Magazine. If you're interested in taking a look at that issue, you can check it out. centervisionleadership.org/magazine, and that issue will be up later on this week. So stay tuned. We'll be tweeting about it very shortly. If you enjoy the conversation today, I want to encourage you to join us on Thursday evening at 9 Eastern for hashtag nonprofit chat. We're going to dig deeper into the questions surrounding strengths and how you implement those in your organization. But without further ado, so thrilled to have Al Winseman with us. Dr. Al Winseman is a senior consultant with the Gallup organization. He has spent 15 years on the ground with Gallup, seen a lot of change over the years, but has been central to a lot of the work that they've done in bringing the strengths-based approach to organizations all over, not only the country, but all over the globe. Al, thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you, Todd, for inviting me. It's great to be here with you and your guests this morning.
Absolutely. So, Al, I'm sitting here and I've seen a lot of talk about strengths. People constantly bandy that term around. But would you, for just a second, take us on a little bit of a history tour? Where did this concept of strengths come about, and how have we reached from that point to today?
Sure, love to. It really began with the work of Dr. Don Clifton. And Don Clifton came back from World War II and decided he wanted to spend the rest of his life making a positive contribution to the world. And so he went into psychology. He was the head of the educational psychology department at the University of Nebraska. And one of the things that Don noticed in psychology is the focus on what's wrong. That there were very, very few studies on what's right with people. And Don was really a questioning mind, and he really kind of posed this that kind of started the foundation of his work. What would happen if we begin to focus on what's right with people instead of fixating on what's wrong? And so that began Don's search and focus on what's right with people. And so he started his work at the University of Nebraska. And left the University of Nebraska in 1969. Actually, my father was one of Don's last doctoral students at the University of Nebraska. So,
wow.
Yeah, I kind of grew up with a strengths-based approach and the idea of talent. But Don started his work in studying people who were successful. And because Don was in education, he wanted to ensure that there were better teachers out there. And so he had a very simple question, very simple premise. If you want better teachers, why don't you find out who your best are and hire more like your best? Well, that's easier said than done. And so Don started looking at what are the talents that make great teachers, and found that the very best do things differently. And they speak differently. And so he created some assessments to help identify the best in particular roles. But from there, he expanded his work into the general population, just people in general. And so Don wanted to create an instrument whereby you could identify how people were wired and look at a way that you could find out where their talents were, those natural ways of thinking, feeling, and behaving. So he started really a 30-year process of developing the Strengths Finder, which is the instrument that we use today, the Clifton Strengths Finder. And he really started just by asking questions. And he asked thousands of questions. The original research around the Clifton Strengths Finder are interviews with 2 million people to find out where their talents and strengths lie. So he asked the questions, and then let's see what the answers tell us. And from that, he identified 34 themes of talent. And a theme is a group of talents. And so when you take the Clifton Strengths Finder, you get your top 5 out of those 34 themes, what we call your signature themes that identify the ways in which you're naturally wired to think, feel, and behave. Just before Don's death in 2003, he was named the father of strength psychology by the American Psychological Association. And really, Don said one time, just as we were developing the online version of StrengthsFinder, wouldn't it be something if 1 million people took this? Do you think we could get 100,000? Well, just last week we passed 12 million people worldwide who've taken the Clifton StrengthsFinder.
Wow, yeah. 12 million.
12 million.
Mm.
Yeah, and so the whole idea of strengths has really taken off, and the idea of focusing on strength, because what Don found in his research is that the very best in a role focus on their strengths. Mm-hmm. They develop their strengths. They focus on what they do best, and instead of trying to fix their weaknesses, they manage them so they don't get in the way. They manage them, and they spend most of their time focusing on their strengths, those things that they do best. And really, that's where we find that you have your greatest potential for growth, your greatest potential for excellence is in focusing on developing your talents into strengths and not ignoring your weaknesses, but manage them so they don't get in the way. And just do the minimum there, but focus on who you are, which really kind of leads into the area where I've done a lot of work, which is within a congregational setting. In other words, focus on the way God has wired you, mm-hmm. your God-given strengths, and discover what those are, and focus on that in finding your best fit in the world.
Now, that's such an interesting overview here, because when we start thinking about the work of Dr. Clifton, and over the course of time, we've had recently on our program, we've had Gretchen Spreitzer, who is a positive organizational psychologist from the University of Michigan. My wife is a counseling psychologist from the positive psychology tree. We've had Dr. Everett Worthington for Virginia Commonwealth University, who participated in this. And so we see the influence of this focusing on the positive as it impacts in a lot of different spheres. And we can, in many ways, I guess, we can trace that back to Dr. Clifton, right?
Oh, absolutely. He was one of the first to get together to gather all of the people who were studying positive psychology back when positive psychology was such an outlier in the world of psychology, and bring them together for the Gallup Positive Psychology Summits. And that started about 20 years ago, when he would bring people like Ed Diener from Indiana and Martin Seligman from.
I was going to say there, you can't talk about it without talking about Marty. Yep.
No. So Marty Seligman and Ed Diener and Shane Lopez, University of Kansas, and what he's done in Hope, all of these great thinkers in the realm of positive psychology, Don would gather them together once a year for our positive psychology summits. And Don was really, he was the grandfather, if you will, of positive psychology, and his strength psychology really became the foundation. So Don was really instrumental in this whole relatively new movement of positive psychology. Absolutely.
And excuse my geeking out for a moment there when I go into that, folks. These are areas that I might be a little bit more interested in than the rest of you, but we really want to dig in out to what you're doing now. You mentioned you spent a lot of your time with the Gallup organization, working in the congregational settings, but I know you do a number of other things with Gallup. Would you, if you don't mind, just share briefly some of the areas that you work in?
Yeah, I'm in learning development, so I spend my time and most of my attention focusing on developing people in a strengths development mode. So I develop and lead programs around strengths, employee engagement, leadership development around everything, our discoveries around leadership. I do one-on-one strengths coaching. I write for our strengths blog. I've written a couple of books and written a few hundred articles for the Gallup Daily Briefing around strengths development. So and what we do. So there's just a lot of different areas where I work within Gallup.
Absolutely. That's fantastic. And folks, I'm just going to give you my bias. Living Your Strengths is sitting over my shoulder, but I also have about 3 or 4 other copies of it. It's one of those books that I keep a handful on hand. And Al is the lead author on that book, and it's something that I've used. And so when we wanted to focus on the idea of strengths, Al was the perfect fit for us to talk to, because he's worked on this in the nonprofit setting and within churches. And so that leads into, to me, what is a really important question. Al, why is it that most organizations, including nonprofits, churches, and others in that setting, why is it that we focus on the weaknesses of our staff first and foremost?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really I think a pertinent question. Is something that we focus on, particularly when we're dealing with individuals. Is we fall into, I think, the misguided thinking that the way to success is by focusing on what's wrong and fixing it. Mm-hmm. If we just focus on fixing our weaknesses, because the conventional wisdom is, don't spend a lot of time on your strengths because you don't want to mess them up. Yeah. You're already doing well there. Let's focus on the things you don't do well. Sure. And when we ever have a developmental review, we spend the first 5 minutes talking about the things you do well, and the next 55 minutes talking about your areas of opportunity. Mm-hmm. I know what those are. Those opportunities for failure is what they are. Sure. Because we think that we need to be somebody different. And the idea is, one of the things that we do is we minimize our talents. Is we think, if I can do it, there's nothing special about me, then anybody can do it. And
that's a great point.
It's flat out wrong, because again, Don's thinking, and this really fits, I think, in well with the whole notion of creation spirituality. Mm-hmm. Is Don's, and through his research, he discovered that everyone does something better than about 10,000 other people. Mm. That's the uniqueness of talent. And so if it does come easy for you, it's probably not coming easy for others. Yeah. Because you're wired differently, you do things differently. So because we think there's nothing special about us, we think everybody ought to be able to do this. And so we minimize our talents, but then we project them on others, saying, you're not trying hard enough. If you just apply yourself, you could do this. If you just study harder, if you try harder, practice more, you should be more organized, just work harder, and here are the steps. Well, if you're not wired that way, this can be difficult. So we just think that everybody can learn anything. And if we just give you the right steps, you can achieve it. Instead of defining the outcomes, and this is the strengths-based approach to staff development, is define the right outcomes in the role and then let each person find his or her own best route, their path of least resistance. And that's a strengths-based approach. But we kind of feel so many times that there are two ways to do things. So if I'm the boss, and I use that word intentionally, mm-hmm. There's my way to do things, and then there's the wrong way to do things. And so I want you to do it my way, because that's the right way, because it worked for me, and because there's nothing special about me, and if I can do it, you can do it. Just do the things I do, and you'll be successful. Mm-hmm. Well, that's not the way individuals are wired. Yeah. So I think we fall into that trap a lot, thinking that we can learn anything. If we just show you the right steps, if you practice enough, you can do anything.
That's a great point. And that kind of leads me to thinking about a book that one of our past contributors to Nonprofit Performance Magazine, a gentleman by the name of J.R. Briggs. J.R. is a pastor in I believe, in the Pennsylvania area, wrote a book about failure. And I thought that was a very intriguing thing for a pastor to write about failure, but it led me to think about misfit, the combination of person and organization, and the struggle that we have sometimes with fit. So I guess let me ask you this as a follow-up to your previous response: how important is right fit and strengths as they work hand in hand when we think about the person or team and the organization as a whole?
Yeah, I think that's really, really important. The whole idea of fit, getting in the right role, getting the right fit to the role is huge. Now, I want to say a word of caution: is that StrengthsFinder is never intended to be a selection instrument to tell you if you'll be successful in the role. It tells you how you'll be successful in the role. However, the way that you're wired, it's going to tell you how you're going to be successful and what might or might not be a good fit. For example, if you have a theme called discipline, That's precision. You like precision, detail, structure, order. Well, you're not going to do very well in a chaotic environment. It's going to cause you a lot of stress because you like structure, detail, and order, and you like routine. And you do best in that, and you can create order out of chaos. So you've got to know that sometimes the environments aren't going to be great. I used to, before coming to Gallup, I was a pastor, and one of the things that we joked about on my staff is hospital visitation. I got to tell you, I was terrible at it. I just was not good. It's not that I'm afraid of hospitals or anything like that. You can't go in there, and I don't do small talk very well.
Yeah.
And I'm not the most brilliant conversationalist, and so it was just a struggle for me. And so, that was kind of our joke on the staff, is that, you know what, if I show up, you're really sick. But here's the thing: I knew that about myself. But what I could do very well was train other people to be great hospital visitors and create a team of visitors who could go do that and be the representatives of the church, and who loved it and were great at it. And so again, that part of the role, hospital, calling on people in the hospital, is incredibly important in pastoral ministry. But you don't have to do it the same way. You don't have to do it the same way. You've got to find, as a leader, what is it that you do well? And for a while, I felt really guilty about that. I felt really guilty because I should be able to do that. And what's wrong with me? And why am I not better at this? Well, I'm just wired differently. And so, however, knowing that that's important, I can train people to do that and take advantage of their talents. And that's kind of what I think what leadership is all about, particularly in the church world, is it's about equipping people for ministry, helping people discover what they're called to do in their be and how they're wired, and then equip them to do that. And that, I think, is just kind of I think that's a biblical model, by the way, of ministry. But I also think, too, that somehow we think that we hire clergy and staff to do ministry for us. But that's not the way it works. Anyway, I'm going to get down off my soapbox.
No, this is great. And I think there's something about that guilt piece that you identified that is a really hard piece. And I know we talk about kind of the social benefit sector, that sector at which, we're seeking to bring positive impact to our society, whether it's in religious or faith-based organizations or whether it's in other community-based organizations. But I think a lot of times we do hold on to that piece of guilt that we don't fit somebody else's image of something, and we've got to identify who exactly we are. And so I think maybe that next question that follows is, so somebody comes to you, Al, and I obviously kind of know where this is going to go, but we hear these kinds of things a lot. I don't know what my strengths are. What do I do? How do I go? And I mean, I might suggest a number of these books behind me, but how do you start that conversation with someone else?
Well, I think you can, and I think taking the Clifton Strengths Finder is a great way to do it. You can do it through one of the books, or you can do it online through the GallupStrengthsCenter.com, where you can purchase a code for about $9 and take the Strengths Finder and get your top 5. That's a great way to do it. But you don't want to stop there, because you can look at that and say, okay, I've done that. Now what? Well, I think it's having that conversation. And if you're a strengths-based leader of an organization and believe in a strengths-based approach, that's one of the places to have the conversation. But you also can have those conversations with the people without taking the Strengths Finder about some of the things that Don called the clues to talent. So, for example, what are your yearnings? What kind of activities are you drawn to? What are the things you naturally, what kinds of things do you want to do? Where have you experienced rapid learning, that you just pick up things on very quickly, that they told you once and you got it? They don't have to tell you again. Where you experience excellence, those moments of unconscious excellence, where you're doing something and saying, wow, that was really good. How'd I do that? The other one is flow. And Csikszentmihalyi, another positive psychologist, has written a lot about flow and the idea of timelessness, where you're doing something when you lose track of time, or the steps just seem to come naturally without thinking about it. And then there's that sense of satisfaction and enjoyment. What are those activities that say, wow, that was sure fun, or when can we do that again? So you start asking those questions. What kinds of activities you're drawn to? Here's a great question. If you're in a nonprofit, you're interviewing a volunteer, ask them, what do you like best about your job? Tell me about your job. What do you like best? Because when people start talking about what they like best, most of the time they're describing what they do best. And then you can kind of get a sense from them, the way they're wired and the things that come naturally. What do you do with ease, excellence, and enjoyment? So you can have those conversations and to find out how people are wired. But if they've taken StrengthsFinder, you've got some great information there for you that you can start having those conversations.
And I think this is such a pertinent topic. We've talked a lot in our program, and even our March issue of the magazine was focused on millennials. And as we think about the millennial generation and some of the things that we know about them in the macro sense, and then as well what we know about mentoring in general, a lot of times there's that question of how do I do this, and what's best. And I think the simple clues to talent, I love that terminology there. The simple clues to talent are a great place. So Al, let me use myself as a guinea pig here. I've not only taken the StrengthsFinder, I've taken Standout, which was kind of a Marcus Buckingham follow-up here. I've taken these things. I've got my 5 strengths. In fact, folks, I'm going to geek out for just a second. You can't see it, but off the wall over here is my big list of my top 5 strengths. But I'm a learner, I'm input, achiever, activator, and strategic. Those are my signature strengths. Once somebody has them, you're a strengths-based leader. Al, what do you do to kind of cultivate that in your team?
Yeah, well, we'll just kind of do a little mini coaching session here.
Woohoo!
So you've got learner and input in that top 5. This is which you know what, you're in the perfect job for you, because learners love the process of learning. Learners are always looking for a class they can take, a course they can take, a book they can read. They love the process of learning, and a lot of times learners, it's about mastering the subject, understanding more. But a lot of times it's just the pure process of learning. And so you probably like taking courses, workshops, going to conferences, learning different things. Yeah, that process.
You might have hit the nail on the head, Al.
And then you've got input. Input is kind of a first cousin to learner, if you will. Input is more about the utility of knowledge or collecting. I take a look, and you've got a ton of books back there. Yeah, learners collect things. I'm sorry, input, people with input collect things. Input they're collectors, they're archivists, because it might be useful to you or to somebody else down the road. I don't want to throw it away. It might be useful, and maybe you collect ideas. But input's like a sponge. You soak it in, but then you got to squeeze it out, because you want to be helpful, and it's a utilitarian, and it's less systematic than learner. You have so you could think and learn and think and learn and think and learn, right? And you like that. However, eventually there comes a time when your activator kicks in and says, okay, let's get started, let's do something. Let's get going. Because activator is the let's get going theme. It's action. It's that drive to start. You want to get something started. But then you've got achiever. And achiever is, you're very productive. You like to get things done. You like to get things done, and I'm guessing, I may be wrong here, but I'm guessing that you probably make lists.
A fair amount, yeah.
Fair amount of lists, yeah. You check things off your list as you get them done.
I do like that point of just taking the line across that, yeah.
Yes. And you may keep track of how many things you get done in the course of a day.
Moderately, not as much as I probably should.
Ah, there you go. Oh, yeah, be careful there. Yeah, but yeah, you feel a great sense of accomplishment. You got a lot of things going. You get things done. You don't like to sit still, and It's vacations. Vacations may for you be filled with activity.
Mm.
And it's stuff I want to do. I want to get this done. We got to go see this. This will be fun. Let's go do this. Yeah, because achievers, that sense of achievement, that sense of accomplishment. But then you've got strategic. Strategic is kind of that, it is consider the possibilities, consider the options. Strategic is about options. You ask somebody with a question, a lot of times the strategic answer is, it depends.
Mm-hmm.
It depends. If you want to accomplish this, you can have option A, B, C, or D. But if you want to accomplish this, you've got option C, D, E, and F. So it's about options, and it's about sorting to the best path. So you may not be compelled to make a list every day, but when it's important, you do. When you've got to get things accomplished, you do.
Yep.
And you don't have to be doing everything. You've got to be busy, but it has to make sense in terms of it's going to help us accomplish where we want to go.
Yeah. Folks, I'm laughing here because this is not the first time I've gone through this piece. First time Al and I have done this, and Al and I know each other very little, but we've been able to engage with each other. But I had somebody else who does some coaching in this, and in the organization that she worked with, she was a strengths coach for them. And the first time this conversation ever happened, I was kind of, it's almost the paranoia starts coming out. How'd you know that about me? And it's real. I mean, the research is there. It's very foundational. But there's something about recognizing the uniqueness of each person. I think, Al, you isolated a lot of that just in this brief conversation here. So now we start thinking about, that's me, and if we were to flip and we were to turn towards your strengths, and we were talking about them before we went on air, folks, Al's strengths are so amazingly fit for him and his work as a consultant, the way he sees, the way he thinks, that futuristic ideation past. But now let's take our organization, and whether that's a church, as you've done in Living Your Strengths, that's a nonprofit, and we start thinking about the uniqueness of all of our people. How do we start bringing that together to find a real strengths approach for our organization, Al?
Yeah, that's a good question. And a couple of things as we start. You mentioned millennials, and there was some research that came out, I think, a week ago or so. Most older employers think that millennials want two things. They want to make a lot of money, and they want promotions right away. If you ask millennials what they want meaningful work. Yeah. They want it to be meaningful. Yeah. And so this is where a strengths-based approach comes into play, is meaningful work. And part of doing meaningful work is being able to do what you do best every day. And so then I can do meaningful work because it fits who I am and I'm making a difference. So if in nonprofits, if you're working in a nonprofit organization and are dealing with volunteers, the other thing too is the demands are so high on nonprofits now that you really can't afford to have the wrong people in the wrong role. Just from efficiency and being able to deliver the services that you want to deliver, you've got to have the right people in the right role, and you've got to help people do what they do best every day, because you can't afford not to. So you start the strengths-based approach, and start by defining the outcomes in the role. Do we have the right people? Jim Collins said you got to get the right people on the bus. Yep. Well, you got to get them on the right seat on the bus too. And if you got the right person on the bus, get them in the right seat. So what makes sense for them? And one of the things that StrengthsFinder can help do in having strengths-based conversation is help people self-select into the roles that they feel will fit them the best. So why do you think you could do this well? What do you bring that could make this happen? Let's figure out the way you're wired and what makes a fit for you. And so those are, so again, a lot of times in nonprofits, particularly in the church area, we have so many slots to fill. And the way we determine if you're qualified is, number one, do you breathe regularly, and you show up about half the time? Yeah. Then you're qualified, because we want to make sure, we want to lower the bar. Yeah. But what would happen in our volunteer organizations if we started with you? if we started to find out the way that you were wired and then find an opportunity that fits who you are. So we start with you, not with us. We start with you. And that's a strengths-based approach, is you start with the people, find out the way they're wired, find out what they're called to do, and then find or create a right fit for them.
Yeah, that's such a reverse paradigm from what we're so used to. And yet, I think, folks, as we listen to this, we're probably nodding our head going, wow, that just makes so much sense. And yet, we've got to flip our current practice in order to implement some of these things.
Yeah, and what we find too is when you do that, it builds people's confidence. And when people have confidence, they can stretch, and they feel more confident going into things that say, I never really thought about this before, but because I've been successful and I'm confident in what I've done before, maybe I can do something very, very different. And so you've got to help people build confidence and resilience.
That's a great point. I worked in some experiential learning environments, and we often talked about we have our comfort zone, our learning zone, and our danger zone. And too often I think we're either throwing people into their danger zone or just letting them sit in their comfort zone, and we're failing to have that growth, that stretch, as you talked about, in that learning zone. So that's a great approach. Al, I love this stuff. I think that there's so much here for each one of us. So somebody's coming to this, and they're not familiar with Gallup. They're not familiar with the strengths-based approach. What's maybe that first step for them to continue this conversation and to dig in deep? Where should they go, or what resources should they pursue?
Well, a great place to go is just our homepage, gallup.com. And then you can start finding on strengths-based development, employee engagement. Now, you'll see a lot of our news feeds on that front line from all of our polling. It's the same company. Gallup, the Gallup poll is just one part of our business, but most of what we do is human development. So you can go there. Another place to go, which would give you some a place to look, is, as I mentioned earlier, gallupstrengthcenter.com. And when you go there, you can take the Strengths Finder, but then there's also resources for coaches to find out more. If you want to read some of the things around coaching, the Strengths Coaches Playbook. And the blogs that are there, and some of the other aspects. There are other. And then if you go to YouTube and just Google Strengths or Strengths Finder, we've got a number of YouTube videos around introductory videos around each of the 34 themes of talent. We've got a number of things there on YouTube, so we've got a YouTube channel as well. So those would be some places to start. Again, any of the Gallup books would be a good place. StrengthsFinder 2.0 is great. Now Discover Your Strengths, the very first book that was written over a decade ago. My book, written with Kurt Liesfeld and Don Clifton, Living Your Strengths, looks at strength development within a congregational setting. So those are a number of those places you can go.
Absolutely. So a lot of resources out there, no matter whether you're the beginner or you're somewhere more advanced in your understanding of the strengths approach. The real key here is that we think that there's such a deep and important value in each of us understanding our own uniqueness and really living in the place that is our strength. We all become, I think, more human as we're playing in a role that fits us. We understand our innate gifts, and there's something about that day that you do the things that you love. I hear all the time in career development circles, people talk about, oh, they left that career to do something they're really passionate about. And I say, well, what would it look like if we're really passionate about our work? We're really passionate and we're living in those places. And I think the strengths-based approach is one of those things that can help us to identify the areas that we can really flourish and we can live flow, as Mihai Csikszentmihalyi talks about. So love the concepts here. Al, thank you so much for joining us. There's so many things I think that each of us can take away from this conversation, and I'm certainly hopeful that our audience here, as they continue to share this and grow this, will think about next steps in their organization and be able to contact somebody like yourself to be able to say, how do I really grab hold and maybe go to the next level and finding some coaching, finding a workshop or something like that might be in my area that I can learn more.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. Thank you so much for joining us. Folks, we're thrilled to have you in as we talk about these conversations. The reason we have great thought leaders like Al on is because we believe it's important for us in this social sector to be able to challenge where we're at, to think about where we can learn from others, whether it's in our sector or outside of our sector, and move forward in such a way that we can flourish and bring greater impact on our communities and on our world. So thank you for joining us. Thrilled to have you in. Again, remind you, please join us Thursday night, 9 p.m. Eastern. We're going to be digging deeper into this conversation at #nonprofitchat. Again, Todd Greer from Center Vision Leadership Foundation, thanks for joining us. Have a great day.